All right, so real quick, since we're talking about Israelites and Hebrews, Semitic people in Ireland, the British Isles, knowing that and also knowing what we have learned in previous videos regarding phonetics, language, writing, Paleo Hebrew, the ancient pictograph, where we get today's modern letters and modern languages. And I'm going to show you Gaelic has Hebrew roots. There's been many people that have done the study. I'm going to show you a couple examples. This book right here is called An Essay on the Antiquity of the Irish Language, being a collation of the Irish with the Punic languages, all right? Punic language. Punic language, also called Phoenicio-Punic or Carthaginian, is an extinct, so it's old, right? Variety of the Phoenician language. Phoenician, it's literally Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew, all right? Semitic language. So he's saying the Irish, what Irish? The Celtic, Gaelic with the Punic language, with a preface proving Ireland to be the Thule of the ancients. And he's saying this is Thule, addressed to the literati of Europe. This is the third edition, original. This is by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Valency, LLD. Essays on the Antiquity of the Irish Language, addressed to the printer of the London Chronicle in the year 1772. Okay, guys? This was originally written in 1772. Again, this is the third edition in 1818 when they brought out the third edition, originally from 1772. On page 9 in the preface, they're talking about the Scitae and the Scoti. They're saying here, hence it appears that the Scoti were a colony of the Scitae. Scitae. Now remember in part 1, we talked about the Scitae and the Saxons' relation, and that this literally means sons of Isaac. That they were the same people and even preserved and bore the same name with the alteration of one letter, only the O for the Y, owing to the difference of pronunciation. Scoietai, Scote, Scoti, Skitai. It is not improbable that the word Celte is likewise a corruption of Skite. All right, they're saying the word Celtes comes from the Scoti, sons of Isaac. In process of time, probably called Skelte or Skelti, Skelte, Kelti or Celti. It matters not in the present treatise whether we acknowledge the Irish to be a Celtic, Pheno-Celtic, or Scytho-Celtic dialect. They all were originally the same, speaking Paleo-Hebrew. At the time of this island being first people, they were identically the same, as many be proved from language, customs, and manners. If an affinity of the Irish language with the Punic be allowed, this discovery will throw great lights on the darker periods of the heathen Irish history. It's going to change history. It will show that though the details be fabulous, even though it seems crazy, the foundation is laid in truth. It's true they were speaking Hebrew. It will demonstrate the early use of letters in this island, because nothing but that use could preserve the least affinity from the flourishing era of Carthage to the present, a space of more than 2,300 years. It will account for the Irish assuming to themselves the names of Feni or Phoenicians, which they have retained through all ages. It will, with the same certainty, account for their giving the name of Bearla Fini, the Phoenician tongue, to one of their native dialects. In fine, it will show that when they adopted the Phoenician syntax, they confined their language to Oriental orthography, while it harmonized itself out of its primitive consonantal Celtic harshness by the suppression of many radical letters in the pronunciation of words. Or are we to be surprised at the assertions of the Irish Sianachis of the Milesians? I remember Milesius is William the Conqueror. Remember, this is from the line of Sarah. So again, Milesians or Fenians, finding themselves understood by the natives at the time of their landing, for the ancient Gauls, who also colonized this country, as well as Britain, spoke the same Fenian dialect, all right? Old Paleo-Hebrew. They all spoke Old Paleo-Hebrew. Says here in, I guess, chapter 1, an essay on the antiquity of Irish language. It has been generally thought that the Irish language is a compound of the Celtic and Old Spanish or Basque. Whoever will take the pains to compare either of these languages with the ancient manuscripts of the Irish will soon be convinced that the Irish partakes not the least of the Biscayan. On a collation of the Irish with the Celtic, Punic, Phoenician, and Hebrew languages, the strongest affinity, nay, perfect identity in very many words, will appear. It may therefore be deemed a Punic Celtic compound, and the following essay will prove this to be somewhat more than a bare conjecture. The Irish is consequently the most copious language extant, as from the Hebrew proceeded the Phoenician, okay? So what was first? Hebrew. From the Phoenician, Carthaginian, or Punic was derived the Aeolian, Dorian, and Etruscan, right? Hebrew was the mother tongue. They're letting you know right here. And from these was formed the Latin. The Irish is therefore a language of the utmost importance and most desirable to be acquired by antiquaries and etymologists. The Irish historians do all agree that they received their letters from the Phoenicians, okay? And that their language was called Berlafini, or the Phoenician dialect, of which their ancient manuscripts bear sufficient testimony. All right, so remember who's landing here? So it's matching what they're telling you in this book from 1772. This book has nothing to do with the Bible or the line of Sarah or anything like that. It's just telling you that the Irish language has roots in the Paleo Hebrew. And all Irish historians do all agree, and all Irish historians agree that they received their letters from Phoenicians. That's why it's called Berlefeni, or the Phoenician dialect, of which their ancient manuscripts bear sufficient testimony. Keating and McCurtain, in their general histories of Ireland, and the MacFirbis, authors of the Liber Lecanus, all confirm the arrival of the Fomhoraics, right? The Fomorians, or African pirates, the hijack Hamites. A lot of them were coming from Canaan, right? They came out of Canaan. Yeah, they settled in Africa, but they were also, sons of Noah, right? Coming out of Canaan. So these are Hamites, and they're just calling them Africans because, again, they always put Ham in Africa. And because they know historically these people are dark skinned, so they're calling them Africans. Not necessarily mean they had to have come from Africa. But yes, they were in North Africa, of course. He's reminding of the history of what they know in Ireland. They know there was Fomorians or Hamites there, that they introduced the art of building with stone and lime, astronomy, that they adored certain stars supposed to have power from the god of the sea, either to guide or mislead the ships, that at length they overran the country. They're talking about Hamites here, Fomorians, these giant, very tall people, and made a complete conquest, drove out the Medians, and laid the island under tribute. It says here of the Roman Saxon capital letters. Remember, Saxon means sons of Isaac. Saxon, the son of Sac, Isaac. So on the Roman Saxon capital letters, the Irish use but three. All the others bear a very great resemblance to the primitive Hebrew and Phoenician as given us by Scaliger and Postellus, and in the Chaldaic characters given us by the latter. Again, Chaldea, where is Chaldees, the Ur of the Chaldees? Check out my Ireland Ur of the Chaldees series. Where was really Abraham living? Where was he born? Really? Chaldea, ancient Chaldea, appears to have been in Ireland. That's why there is resemblance here to Chaldaic characters given us by the latter are to be found, all those used by the ancient Irish, bearing the same figure and power. So further down has another comparison right here. It says Punica, Maltese, and then Irish, Allah, God Almighty, omnipotent. Saman, the heavens. Sam, the sun. Samra, summer. Sema, an assembly. Samha, in a congregation. Baal, Sidonian, so Phoenician. Baal, right, meaning Lord or something like that in Hebrew, and then Baal, Ben, the chief deity of the ancient Irish. Baal worship, remember? So it has a lot of good information. And you guys can see there's a lot of comparisons, and it literally means all the same. It's almost the same pronunciation. So they're going in alphabetical order in this book. If you want to pause it real quick, and go over it yourself, go ahead and do that. Just wanted to show you guys that this book exists. All right. All right. So I got another book here I want to show you guys. More proof, more correlation of what we're showing in this video, the last two videos. And when we're talking about the mother tongue, it says here on the antiquity of the Gaelic language, showing its affinity to Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, superseding the Masoretic points and furnishing a key to the Hebrew vowel sounds, an essay by the Reverend D. McIntyre, minister of Kincardine. And this McIntyre family goes back with the people that came with Jeremiah. And this is from 1865. It says here in the preface, the progress hitherto made to give the Gaelic languages legitimate rank among early European tongues appears to me unsatisfactory. I have devoted the following pages to that subject, and hope it may be found a step in the proper direction. I feel impelled by a sense of duty to make public the marked sameness in vowel sounds I have lately detected between the Gaelic and the Hebrew. That was my chief object in writing the essay, and I trust the evidence adduced throughout is sufficiently cogent to show at once that the sacred original of the Old Testament can be best read and understood by means of its own textual vowels, safe from the smallest risk of error, without calling in the aid of the fanciful system of rabbinical points. Dr. McIntyre, he wrote that in 1865. All right, so, it's a great book. He breaks down a lot when it comes to the vowels and the consonants and how it's used in the Gaelic and how it's used in the Hebrew. And once you understand how it's used, you can see the similarities between both. Here is showing some examples with the Gaelic and the Greek. Remember, Greek comes from the Paleo-Hebrew as well. So these and many more less distinct meet us before going over 4 letters of the alphabet. It is necessary to produce more examples. Says here, let me point out here to Professor Blackie and other Gretchens that in the above list we have in every case the Celtic, the root, and in every case the Greek, the derivative. The primitive trunk or body of the word is pure Celtic, and by an affix or prefix or increment superinduced it becomes Grecian. There is no use trying to ignore that fact. All right, it's a fact. He's telling you, look. He goes on to point out, it says here, proceed to exhibit a comparison between the Gaelic and the Latin. Then he gives an explanation as to how, and he shows some examples as well. Gaelic, Latin, as you guys can see, very similar. Remember that the Old Latin is literally like Paleo-Hebrew. All right, further ahead in this book, interesting part here, says here, but to return to our theme, Canaan was at that period alluded to severely suffering from a 7 years famine, which drove Jacob and his household to Egypt to their long sojourn in that country. 500 years thereafter, or 1200 years before Christ, we read that intestine war raged in Canaan. At that date, we ventured to fix the period at which the last migration of the Celtic tribes took place, and under the leadership of Gaal, of the line of Hamor, king of Shechem. All right, Gaal was the real person of the line of Hamor. That's where they get Gaal from, when as pretender trying to regain the kingdom of his ancestors. Having been overpowered in an unequal combat by the men of Abimelech, it is natural to suppose that Gaal would forever quit his fatherland, and with his men follow in the track of his predecessors from Canaan to seek his fortune in the west. Now remember, Canaan, ancient Canaan, real Canaan, the promised land is in America. So it says he went to seek his fortune in the west until he found them in the peninsula. It is equally natural that his countrymen would there and then readily recognize his royal lineage, elect him their chief, and name the country of their adoption after him. His name distinctly adds credence to this opinion. The variation in spelling between Gaal and Gaul is easily settled. According to the appointed reading of the Hebrew, it should be Gol or Gaul, and not Gal, which is the pointed system. This fact also strengthens our opinion. We mentioned moreover that the affinity of Gaelic to Hebrew is apparent only when the latter is read without the aid of the Masoretic points, a fact, as we observed above, which of itself destroys the integrity of that system. Let me remark here that Gol may be the origin of Kola, a man's name very common among the Highlanders. Who's the Highlanders? Scottish Highlander. It has come down by the tide of tradition that the first settlers of Caledonia came from Spain. It is even recorded that Kola, Ceuta, Shatach, Spain Tech, that is, Spanish coal of the Hundred Conquests, was the ancestor of the MacDonalds, Lords of the Isles, all right? Who's the ancestors of the MacDonalds? All right, they were coming from Spain, ancient Caledonians. Remember the story of who the ancient Caledonians were and where they were coming from? Further down in the book, it says, whatever satisfaction may be derived from this result now come to by our investigation. And we trust that without any exaggeration, our position is well fortified by argument and illustration. The point arrived at which pleases ourselves most is the one which resuscitates the Hebrew vowel sound by the aid of the Gaelic, the last surviving daughter of that venerable mother of all languages. All right, they're letting you know here, this book right here from 1865 regarding the affinity of the Gaelic with the Hebrew, that the Gaelic is the daughter of the mother tongue, which is Hebrew, so-called Hebrew, right? The original language. The audible living tones of that living tongue, whether echoed from the romantic glens of Caledonia, the green strath of Erin, or the metalliferous ridges of Wales, are the same and reverberate the same through the mountains of Judah, to awaken from her long slumbers that revered old parent, to let us once more hear in her own solemn tones the promise as Abraham received it in the law of Hawa as Moses rehearsed it off the tables in the ears of Israel. The results thus arrived at, we repeat, is no ordinary satisfaction to us, and the claims of our language to consideration are obvious. It is still spoken by or preached to above 500,000 of loyal subjects throughout the highlands, and yet it stands unrecognized in any of our universities. Continuing further down says, where in all the extent of human history is it known that the study of languages ever interfered with social progress? Yet there is not in our day a more favorite theory than do away with the Gaelic before you can improve the highlands. This slang is the doctrine of only shallow and selfish adventurers. It is so fragile in texture as really cannot bear an overhauling. We pass over it in pity and contempt. Did their native tongue ever hinder Highlanders in the height to which they rose as scholars, as colonists, as scientific men, and as soldiers? Until they can answer all these and similar questions by logic and grammar, we leave the sapient theorists and their dupes to their cogitations, assuring ourselves that the Gaelic language will not die out while Hebrew, Greek, and Latin are written and known, while the Gael or his descendants inhabits any part of the globe, or while dwells in highland hearts the native chivalry of Tirnam ben Nan Glen and Nan Geishkish. Yeah, I got more, guys. So I have another book here, guys, regarding the Celtic or the Celtic, right? Celtic. It says here the affinity between the Hebrew language and the Celtic, being a comparison between Hebrew and the Gaelic languages, or the Celtic of Scotland, by Thomas Stratton, M.D., Eden. The third edition. This is from 1872. So again, another book letting you know the Hebrew language and the Celtic is the same. The Celtic comes from the Hebrew. The affinity between the Hebrew and the Celtic. Early in the year 1833, I drew up a short comparative vocabulary of Hebrew and Gaelic. In 1840, this was printed at the end of my comparative Greek and Gaelic vocabulary. In 1870, this was reprinted without any alteration. After 1833 or 1840, I did not look into the subject again until November 1871, when I made many additions to my former list. On this occasion, 1872, the manner of spelling Hebrew words and English letters is the one followed by Aaron Pick in that work of great ability and industry, the Bible Student's Concordance. In comparison one language with another, there are two questions to be considered. First, the grammar of two languages, and secondly, the separate words of each. In Hebrew, the prepositions are incorporated with the personal pronouns. The same is done in Gaelic. Aig, at, and other 15 prepositions are incorporated with the personal pronouns. This was pointed out by Stewart in his Gaelic grammar. Of Hebrew nouns, a plural termination is im or im. This is like the Gaelic mo, more. After 1833 or 1840, I did not look into the subject again until November 1871. After a few days, I made a discovery that gave me a key to word analogies I had not previously noticed. I found that after taking away the first part of a Hebrew word, the next syllable or the next two syllables resemble a word in Gaelic. All right, you see how he's breaking it down? In this word dissection, there is taken away either an initial vowel or an initial vowel sound or an initial consonant or an initial consonant followed by a vowel sound. There are about 452 Hebrew words which, after being treated in this way, are like Gaelic words. Under the letter Aleph, there are 39 words. Under Beth, 8. Under Gimel, 14. Under Daleth, 12. All right, so he's finding, sounds and words with each letter of the Hebrew alphabet or alphabet, right, or letters, pictorial writing. In this comparison of Hebrew with the Celtic, only one branch of the Celtic is referred to, namely the Gaelic, now spoken in the Highlands and Western Isles of Scotland. The words quoted may be found in the Gaelic Dictionary by MacLeod and Dewar. Any remarks here about the Gaelic or Scoto, Celtic, Scoto, Scata, Scate, Saka, Sak, sons of Isaac, apply equally to the Irish language and to the Manx by referring to the Welsh, Cornish, or Armoric, right? Armoric. It is likely that other proofs of Hebrew Celtic linguistic kinship would be found, as words which one Celtic dialect may have lost may be preserved in another. So basically, he's going to go through each letter of the Hebrew, right, writing. So right here, he has some examples of what he's talking about. Says here, first group, Hebrew words beginning with a vowel or a vowel sound in Gaelic, words beginning with a vowel. Says here, ale, God, compared with Gaelic, ailt, high. All right. So, go through it real quick. Olaf, to teach. Olam, a learned person. Remember, Olam Fola, Jeremiah. So there you go. That's a Hebrew word. It's what we were reading in the other books. Some more examples. Again, you guys can pause it and take a look at it yourself. I just wanted to show you guys. Look, there's books talking about this. They never told us this stuff. They just want us to think pagan, pagan, pagan. But they're hiding the truth about the mother tongue. Where are these people coming from? Canaan, ancient America. What is the connection with the British Isles and the Americas? We've already had so much videos talking about this in different ways. You know, who were the ancient navigators? Who's the so-called Phoenicians? Who's the Danites? Who got kicked out of Canaan by Joshua? It's a lot of connections here. Of course, the Celtic is Hebrew. We got a bunch of Israelites and Hebrews or so-called Phoenicians settling these isles.